That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Gold, the third film directed by Anthony Hayes, in which Zac Efron goes to the Outback in the post-apocalyptic future. Yeah, that's right. Screen Media Films is releasing it March 11th, 2022.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So, the director?
Anthony Hayes, who also co-stars. It's a very limited cast.
He's the driver.
He's Man 2.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Is this the directorial debut, you said?
His third film.
Do we know the other two?
New Skin from 2002 and 10 Empty in 2008. He's also...
New Skin.
An actor.
A Kardashian biopic. Go ahead.
No, that's New Faces. New Bodies, New Faces. He has been in quite a few film productions. He's worked with quite a few notable Australian directors himself.
He's the director and the screenwriter.
He is the director, screenwriter, which is co-written by Polly Smith, and one of the leads. He has a vibe. He looks like the oldest Hemsworth.
You know, I didn't mind him, and I think that the film is well directed.
Yes.
My issue is more with the story, but I think overall it's an interesting enough film.
Yeah.
I have issues though, but let me tell the basic story. So the opening of the film tells us that
it's sometime, someplace not far from now.
So we don't know where we are, what time it is.
Election year 2024.
Right. But it feels post-apocalyptic, where it appears like we're in Death Valley, but you just alluded to that it was shot in Australia. It's very hot and dusty and barren. So we see Zac Efron make his way to some sort of outpost, and he is saying like, hey, I'm supposed to meet some person here who's going to give me a ride. The person shows up, the director, and takes him on a ride. And we find out Zac is going to some sort of like work camp.
Yeah, it's very Chairman Mao.
So on their way there, the vehicle breaks down. So while the driver is fixing the vehicle, Zac wanders off into the desert and finds a huge piece of gold.
A boulder.
Like a boulder. It's too big for him to sort of like pick up and be discreet about. So he tells the driver like, hey, come look. And the driver's like, well, we need to dig this shit up. So they spend a lot of time attempting to dig it out, but it is far too big for two people to remove. So the driver says, okay, girl, why don't you go... like, take my truck and go back to wherever the hell we came from, and I'll give you the name of a person. They'll help you get an excavator. You bring your ass back. We'd get this shit out of here and we'll be rich. And we get the sense prior to this moment that Zac's character has a problem sort of like being assertive. Because there are a few moments where he doesn't really speak up for himself the way he should. Like... when he gets to the outpost, he's talking to like a person there who's ignoring him.
Who's watching the film 1984, based of course on George C. Orwell's... Is it George C? George Orwell's film starring John Hurt.
And also, while they're driving, so he agrees to pay 200 something. We don't know what the currency is, but 200 something. And then the driver's like, well, it's 200, but you got to pay for gas and water. And then Zac's character is kind of being like, well, I guess it's okay.
But, you know, you'd be stuck at that point anyway.
You would be, but it's clear that he's not used to, like, advocating for himself, maybe. So at the point where the man says, you take my truck and go get the excavator, Zac's dumbass says, no, I'll stay. You go. And the man's like, are you sure? Being out here in this desert is not easy, and I'm going to be gone for days. So, you know, I recommend you go. And he's like, no, I'm staying. And he's like, all right, girl, we'll take this sat phone and I'll be back. And he doesn't have enough food or water, no real shelter. He's literally in the middle of the desert. So the bulk of the film is Zac out in this desert trying to battle the heat, hydration. There are a bunch of wild dogs out there.
It's a combination of man versus nature and man versus himself.
When a woman... because Zac like is wandering around the desert and finds like the fuselage of like a small jet plane that's crashed. So he takes refuge in there when this woman shows up, and she's kind of harassing him and sort of alluding to the fact that maybe the world that we are existing in is due to like... to me, she made it sound like sort of like more metropolitan areas or a certain region of the world is what caused the downfall, something like that, because she says, oh, now y'all want to come out here and ruin our area. So,
She's a MAGA.
oh, don't say that. We're gonna get comments now. Damn.
What? I'm just being funny. I mean, she clearly doesn't like urban folk.
She's like harassing him, and he kills her. Okay, so the end of the film is like Zac is worse for wear. Like he is literally on his last leg, and all these dogs are surrounding him. When he gets another phone call from the driver saying like, "Hey, I'm almost there," and he's like, "Well, you need to hurry up." But we find out what we suspected from the very beginning, which is this man is waiting for Zac to die so he can bring his little bulldozer in and take the gold for himself.
There's also a sandstorm in which he's impaled by a branch.
Oh, yeah. So
he's wounded.
There's no hope that...
He looks like The Walking Dead at this point.
Whoever did the makeup, I think, did a really good job because he looks terrible from the jump. But the end is the driver looking through binoculars, watching Zac get killed by these dogs. It's important to know that right before he gets attacked by the dogs, he sees that woman again. And as the audience, we're assuming he's hallucinating because he's near death. But we find out that's that lady who he killed, her sister. And she's looking for her. And she can tell that something's not right with Zac. So the dogs kill Zac. And when the driver sees it, he takes his truck with the bulldozer down to the gold. And when he gets out of the truck, he gets shot with a bow and arrow, which we presume is from the sister. The end.
Cue Neil Young.
Okay, could I go through my notes?
No, Heart of Gold.
I'm not familiar with that reference.
Okay. Neil Young, who's now married to Daryl Hannah.
Does he sing R&B and soul music?
You know more than just that. But
Right, but Neil Young. I've seen Neil Diamond in concert.
It's different Neil. Different Neil.
I know Neil Patrick Harris.
Neil LaBute.
No.
Neil Jordan.
Who's that?
Those are both very notable film directors.
I had a crush on a boy named Neil in 3rd grade.
Oh, wonder what he's up to. Anyhow, what are your notes on this?
Chicken Soup for the Soul Entertainment. When we saw that, we started giggling.
Well, I was
because
like,
that's such a weird...
Well, I was like, is this some Christian shit?
I know, I was concerned. Well, we can't say that either, I guess. Now we have Trump supporters and Christians mad at us. No, I feel like the tone of the...
I have to be me.
Wow, that gets you in trouble most of the time.
Well, I don't know.
The Christian Chicken Soup for the Soul Entertainment didn't match like this post-apocalyptic. They need to change that name.
This was giving me, of course, Mad Max vibes, but because it's a commentary on how we're destroying the planet, right? It's kind of an environmental metaphor, this film is. But it also was giving me vibes of Erich von Stroheim film, an infamous 1920s adaptation of a Frank Norris novel. The film is called Greed, but it's based on McTeague. The original cut of that movie is 9 hours long, but that's all about, if you haven't read the book or seen that film, both are excellent. But to me, the director is probably familiar with that reference.
You like to shout in my ear regularly.
That's not shouting. It was also giving me, because of the Australian vibe, I was thinking early Nicholas Roeg, Walkabout, and Peter Weir, like Picnic at Hanging Rock. It doesn't quite get to the level of those art house classics, but you could sense that those were in this person's mind.
When Zac and the driver first make their way and they're in this like raggedy ass truck and it's hot as hell and we see Zac trying to play with the air conditioning and the man is like, don't touch that, don't turn it all the way up, like it doesn't work. So it's hot and poor Zac's just in the truck like trying to stay cool. And then in this awful heat with no air conditioning, the man starts smoking. So he's an asshole. Then he says, you have to pay an extra $100 for the gas. And Zac's like, but I thought it was $200. They told me it was $200. Well, they should have told you it was $200 plus gas. And that water you used back wherever the hell we were, that's an extra $20. So then, before the truck breaks down, there's another scene where the truck gets like a flat tire. And the man makes Zac change the tire. Mm-hmm. And I thought, guess how much it would have been to change that tire? $120.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yes, he clearly is somebody that doesn't advocate for himself. And then when we learn he's going to this labor camp, the guy's like, you're going to get eaten alive because you got them puppy dog eyes. And...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're too sexy to be at the labor camp. There is a scene people should know about that I found upsetting. Is there all these wild dogs, and we see the driver like kill a dog, and you see him smash the dog's head in. That was a bit much for me.
I was also reading the dust storms where those aren't CGI, though they actually captured.
It looked great.
It looks really good for that reason. I think the woman, stranger, Susie Porter, I think is super creepy.
Yeah. Well, again, whoever did the makeup did a very good job. Also, there are a lot of flies.
Yeah, that was.
And they look real.
Triggered.
From what?
No, just. Oh. It's gross.
That makes me think of Jamie Foxx's comedy special from the 90s where he talks about going to Africa and all he talks about are the flies. But anyway, yeah, there are flies everywhere, and like Zac's character is just covered in flies. So I know that took a lot.
But inevitably, this film does fall a bit victim to its own conceits, where we get a lot of time with Zac alone in the desert, and when you have these, a lot of films have this tendency where their protagonist is stuck amongst themselves, giving them dialogue or having them talk to themselves or the wildlife nearby, and he's talking to a scorpion.
That's my next note.
Which is very much like Blake Lively in The Shallows with that
bird.
Fucking bird.
Yeah, and then he didn't kill the scorpion. No. And the scorpion ends up, because when he gets impaled with that thing from the sandstorm, the scorpion crawls into his little wound.
There's some ambiguity there too. We don't quite know.
This film made me think of that film with my friend Ryan Reynolds, Buried.
Rodrigo Cortez. Yeah, that's a great film.
But I think the problem is like you just mentioned, there's so much time spent with Zac, but he doesn't, there's no really internal monologue that we're getting, and like he's not really doing much. And really the only talking he's doing, I said there could be a drinking game for whenever he tells the dogs to get the fuck out of here. That's pretty much most of the dialogue that we hear from Zac is him yelling at the dogs.
Yeah, unfortunately you never really think more of him than just like, oh, you're a big fool.
You're a big cute fool.
It's funny how a lot of these films, these dystopic odysseys, really feel like westerns, right? Because it's like the world is going to regress itself to the old west.
That lady who comes and like tells him like, "What are you doing here? It feels like you're hiding something." Blah blah blah. She was so annoying. He kills her by hitting her in the head with a shovel, and I have to say that was very satisfying.
She felt very much like the personification of the vultures who are circling overhead. Like he's carrion. He is clearly somebody that is going to die.
Yes.
And she was moving in for the kill.
Yeah.
Even how because he's scrabbling about in the fuselage, and she creepily like scrapes the side of it before she bangs on the door.
Yeah, it is. There are moments. The satellite phone that he's using, I felt like. Too bad they couldn't get like Motorola or like some manufacturer's name on it, because it would have been a really good advertisement, because that phone takes a licking and keeps on ticking. Right?
It sure does.
The battery, it gets caught in a snowstorm or a sandstorm and it's and it still works.
I was going to mention at the beginning, there's a 2016 film with Matthew McConaughey called Gold.
Oh.
Which I really didn't like. But I almost kind of wish there had been something a little more creative with the title as well.
I wish this, I like to say what I would have preferred. I would have preferred, because from the jump we know I don't like when it's very obvious that something's not right. It's like the driver, we know he has no integrity and he's not a kind man. So when they find this gold, it's like, well, obviously he's not going to do right by Zac. So what I wish would have happened is at the point, first of all, it's like what, 20 minutes till they find the gold? Mm-hmm. That seemed, well, the setup was fine. But when they find the gold, what I wish they would have said is like, we're going to go together to get the things we need to get this gold. But they're out in like no man's land. So it could have been an isolation film with the two of them. And then the bulk of the film is them sort of figuring out how to get rid of the other one. I think that would have been more satisfying. Sure. But I also understand what you said about like how Zac's character is like, we know he's going to die. It just isn't very satisfying to watch. It almost feels like this would have, the story as it was presented in this film, to me would have worked better as like a short.
Sure. It's like there's a dimension that's missing, because we've seen things like this before, whether about man's greed or environmentally. They even make a point to show him like breaking off a very large, the size of somebody's head, he's able to break off of this gold boulder, and he still stays. It's like, by then I would have...
Yeah. Well, and then also, there are all these questions like, what would they even do? Like, what kind of world do we live in where gold would even have value, and where would he take it? And so,
Yeah, there's some interesting questions because we really don't know anything about this world. There's still television and electricity because we get that Orwell reference, but
do you have any other notes on there?
no, that's it. I think it's enjoyable enough, and I think it's very well shot. I think Efron, this is the first time he's been on screen since The Beach Bum in 2019. I think he does what he can. It's a lot of Zac Efron, so if you're a fan of him...
Although, I mean, he's covered in dirt and mud and clothes, so you're just getting, and him giving you
Face.
like a deep voice, which I don't think is unnatural, but yeah.
Yeah, he's fine.
He's fine. What would you give it?
I'd give it 2.5.
I would give it 2.5 as well. Thank you.